On September 12, 2023, during a routine press conference hosted by the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, spokesperson Mao Ning addressed the concerns regarding the recent pessimistic outlook on China's economy by several Western countries. U.S. President Biden mentioned that China is facing economic challenges, influenced by both global economic slowdown and Chinese economic policies. Australia's treasurer stated that China's economic growth has significantly slowed down, impacting Australia. U.S. Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, Adeyemo, mentioned that the slowdown in China's economic growth will primarily affect neighboring Asian countries. How does China respond to these assertions? It seems that every so often, there are various theories of China's collapse, but the fact remains that China's economy has not collapsed. Instead, the theories of China's collapse time and time again, stated Mao Ning. Mao Ning emphasized that this year, the global economic recovery has been weak, and the external environment remains challenging and complex. However, China's economy has continued to recover and is showing an overall positive trend. In the first half of the year, China's GDP grew by 5.5% compared to the same period last year, a significant acceleration from the 3% growth seen last year. The International Monetary Fund predicts a 5.2% growth for China's economy this year and expects China to contribute 1/3 to global economic growth. China's economy remains a major driving force behind the growth of the world economy. So, today we are going to talk about the China collapse theory. Who was the first to put forward it? Why did the China collapse theory keep appearing in the West after that? If you have been observing Western reports on China, you would find that there will be a wave of China collapse theory in Western society from time to time, sometimes it mixed with China threat theory. Along with China's reform and opening up, the Western world's argument that the path of socialism with Chinese characteristics will inevitably lead to failure has never ceased. Then, what can we see behind the China collapse theory? Is China really heading for collapse? Okay, let's get more details about that. The earliest rhetoric against China began in 1989. Looking at the various theories of bad-mouthing China over the years, the more popular periods were all accompanied by major turbulence in the international political and economic environment. In 1989, what prevailed in the Western world was that the Communist Party of China was bound to collapse. Like many socialist countries in Eastern Europe, China would inevitably experience a color revolution and lead to a political collapse. The Western world, led by the United States, took this opportunity to step up its containment and infiltration of China, and the wave of bourgeois liberalization took the opportunity to rage inside and out of China. Among them, the end of history assertion by Japanese-American scholar Francis Fukuyama is the most typical, boldly predicting that China will be the next country after the Soviet Union's political collapse. However, history is often full of irony. After 33 years, Francis Fukuyama himself, who predicted China's collapse, had to sincerely point out that the state, the rule of law, and the democratic accountability system are the three basic elements of a modern political order. When the three are balanced, an ideal political order will emerge. Therefore, when building a political order, we first need to build a strong government, then enforce the rule of law, and finally build a democratic accountability system. The rule of law and democratic accountability must be able to contain the power of the government, but if the state is incapacitated, it will lead to disaster, as in Syria and Iraq, the society will be plunged into large-scale chaos. China's success is largely due to the construction of a strong government. In contrast, the United States, whose government power has been weakened, is in decline. Fukuyama even directly pointed out that China's development is not because of luck, but because it conforms to the laws of international politics, and there is no political system that can be applied to all countries in the world. China jumped out of the Cold War mentality, got rid of the containment of Western ideology, followed its own path, focused on economic construction, implemented reform and opening up, and has become the second largest economy in the world in a short time. Francis Fukuyama's end of history conclusion has gone bankrupt, and the rhetoric that the Chinese Communist Party is heading for collapse will absolutely collapse without being attacked. Why did the China collapse theory keep spreading in the West after Francis Fukuyama? Looking back at the past 30 years, I think there are three main reasons for it. One is the prejudice of Western ideology, the second is the prejudice of Western social science, and the third is the prejudice of Western culture, or more precisely, it is the combination of these three types of prejudice. The combination of these three types of prejudice is also called new ignorance. For example, Darren Acemoglu, an economist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and James Robinson, a political scientist at Harvard University, published Why Nations Fail in 2012. They argue that some countries failed because their institutions are extractive, and some countries succeeded because their institutions are inclusive. They believe that the system of Western countries is inclusive, so it succeeds. The system of the state led by the Communist Party is an extractive system. Such a country cannot succeed, even if it appears to be successful in the short term, it is not the real success and it will fail in the future. They also reason that China under the leadership of the Communist Party is an example of social growth under an extractive system, and the growth in China is unsustainable unless there is a thorough political change that transforms into an inclusive political system. The West is following such absurd logic, so when it comes to China's political system, the questions raised by the West are always the same: why China has only economic reforms, but no political reforms? How can China succeed without political reforms? When will China abandon the one-party system? And so on. To tell the truth, in China, such behaviors of the West will be considered as lazy people doing learning. Ignorant people are fearless. They start from the end of history and Eurocentrism, do not need to do empirical research, do not need to understand the cultural and historical traditions of different countries. As long as your practices and your institutional arrangements are different from mine, you are backward, reactionary, and about to collapse. This mentality has led to an increasingly rigid system in the West. Many political and intellectual elites in the West do not want to make progress or reform. As a result, the phenomenon of black swans emerges one after another, and the people are more and more disappointed. In this epidemic prevention and control, such situations can be found everywhere. Western civilization has its strengths and weaknesses, and the biggest weakness of them is the tendency to be self-centered. Many Westerners believe that human history will end in the Western model and that the West will absolutely dominate the future of the world. How could the development of world history end up in the Western political model? The efforts of different ethnic groups and countries to explore their own development paths and models are in the ascendant in the world today. The exploration and understanding of the political system in human society is far from exhausted, and the West has a long way to go for its own political reform. Moreover, the Western world itself has experienced one crisis after another, including a profound political crisis. As a result, it reminds me of the Enlightenment movement in European history. The Enlightenment replaced ignorance and absolutism with rationalism. It was historical progress in general, and it promoted the Industrial Revolution in the West. Of course, it also brought many problems. However, with the passage of time, the West has pushed its own political and economic model to absoluteness, forming a kind of new ignorance that it tries to sell to the non-Western world, so this failure is absolutely to be expected. The rise of China has touched many sensitive nerves in the world, and it is far beyond the interpretive ability of Western political discourse. In this big change, China plays a pivotal role. The Chinese people, especially the intellectuals, can no longer take Western discourse as their guide, not to blindly believe these so-called famous scholars of the West. We should think independently, in the spirit of seeking truth from facts, in the spirit of our own conscience, knowledge and patriotism, while absorbing Western wisdom, rejecting Western neo-ignorance and absolutism, and exploring and constructing Chinese discourse in the era of post-Western discourse system, and make Chinese people's own unique contributions to human progress. Okay, that's all for today. How do you think about it? Please put your comments or suggestions in the comments below, and share your thoughts about today's topic. We will see you in the next video. Goodbye.